Welcome to the Biohack Her podcast. I'm Azra Alagic, your host and founder of Biohack Her. I'm a longevity and integrative nutrition health coach, a health and wellness journalist, writer, corporate consultant, and a biohacking advocate. Are you worried about getting old, wondering whether the biological demise of your body is just something that you have to accept? Well, think again. We don't have to get old the way we used to, because now you can biohack your body to a younger you. Biohack Her is a space where we can explore ways to optimize our health to live well longer. Whether it's through nutrition, exercise, cryotherapy, supplementation, technology, and more, I'll be bringing you information and interviews on understanding how biohacks can help you prevent disease, slow down, or even reverse the aging process by taking control of your unique bio-individuality. Want to know more? Let's start turning back the clock. Hey everyone, welcome to the Biohack Her podcast. Today I chat to Dagmar Ganser about how maintaining good health not only helps with improving and maintaining your fertility for longer and your chances of falling pregnant, but also ensuring your children will live a long and healthy life. The choices we make about our bodies impacts our children's health in the future. Think on that for a minute. Every bite you take, every move you make with your body, every toxin you're exposed to has a direct impact on the genes that your child will inherit. Meaning good health and ensuring we live well longer starts at conception. Many of us don't think about trying to live well longer until we get older and hit a milestone birthday, or our bodies start to let us know that things aren't quite what they used to be. When we don't think about the choices we make earlier in our lives, particularly before we have children, our health issues often become our children's health issues. If you're planning to have kids, this is a really important conversation to listen to. Not only will you learn how to improve your fertility, but you'll also learn how to improve your health to ensure that you and your children will live long, healthy lives. Dagmar is an accredited naturopath registered with the Australian Traditional Medicine Society. Her qualifications include a Bachelor of Health Sciences in Complementary Medicine from Charles Sturt University, Certificate of Integrative Medicine from the University of Queensland, Advanced Diplomas in Naturopathy, Nutrition and Western Herbal Medicine from the Australian Institute of Applied Sciences. She is also a kinesiologist and internationally certified bioresonance practitioner with over 20 years clinical experience. During that time, Dagmar has seen thousands of patients, helping people fulfill their dream of starting a family. She received the Outstanding Achievement Award for Excellence in Naturopathy for graduating top of her year by Eagle Pharmaceuticals, and also the Excellence in Naturopathic Clinical Application Award by Natural Remedies Group in 2005. Having worked in multidisciplinary clinics, Dagmar opened her own practice, True Medicine, in 2009, located on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia. And she has just recently published her first book, Conversations with My Daughter, How to Have a Healthy Baby. Well, get ready to have many aha moments like I did from this fascinating conversation. Hi, Dagmar. Welcome to the Biohack Her podcast. So excited to have you on today because I think we've got lots to chat about today. I wanted to dive right in. You've in the process of just about to release your first book, Conversations with My Daughter, How to Have a Healthy Baby. And in that, you explain that if we're to maintain good health for longer, you say it starts at the beginning, and I mean right at the beginning, which is conception, right? So let's dive into there. And you call that the sickness continuum. Can you explain what you mean by that?
I can, Azra, and thanks for inviting me to Biohack Her podcast. So with the term sickness continuum, this actually relates to a trend that we're seeing all over the world where each generation is now sicker than the one before it. But we can change our fate by optimizing our genes and also the environment. And if we don't do that, we will continue to suffer more chronic disease as the generations go on. And that's really what I wanted to influence in the book. And by helping people become more aware and informed that they can actually make these positive changes and that there's no better place to begin than with having a healthy baby. Because if their baby is healthy, they are also influencing the future health outcomes of their future generations.
I must say, it really blew my mind when I read some of your sample chapters in terms of the whole concept of that we as parents have an influence on the health of our future children, which we haven't even conceived yet, potentially, right? And I've got 3 kids and I've never even thought of it like that. It makes sense when I think about it now, but it just I did not comprehend that until I started to read, your book. So with that in mind, what are the main causes of fertility that you've seen come through your clinic for both men and women? Perhaps we kick off with men.
To be honest, they've been about as varied as the people who've come to see me. Some of them were women who, once coming off the pill, couldn't, or their periods hadn't returned, and they hadn't returned for 6 to 8 months. And then 3 months later, they were pregnant. Others just needed a little bit of help and advice with their diet and lifestyle, especially when it comes to stress. In other cases, we worked on liver function and balancing the hormones, and this is done both in the men and the women. Some cases can be structural, where there are obstructed vas deferens, which is where the tubes where the sperm comes out, or the fallopian tubes in women. So that then, of course, is a surgical issue. And sometimes it's purely stress. So, you know how sometimes grandparents say to couples that can't conceive, they say, "I'll just go on a holiday."
Yeah.
There's a bit of truth in that. But there are so many different contributors, and especially in the world we live in today, because we are faced with so many different challenges, it's really hard to just say, oh, it's one thing or another.
Yeah, there are contributing factors, I suppose. And can we dive in a little bit more into stress and how that contributes to infertility? Because stress, generally speaking, isn't great for our health, and in particular, we know that from a longevity perspective, it's not great for our health long term, particularly chronic stress. But from a fertility perspective, can you do a bit of a, I suppose, deeper dive into how stress specifically impacts fertility? Because I think, we, as you alluded to, in our modern world, where there are so many of us that are stressed, and we probably don't even think that this could be contributing, to fertility, to our inability to conceive.
Well, our bodies are basically still the same as we were in the Stone Age. So back then, we would have a stress would be maybe the neighbouring clan coming around with a big club, or a saber-toothed tiger chasing us. So then we go through our stress response, known as the fight-flight. And as you alluded to, it's the chronic stress that's the problem. So normally we have a stressor, we respond to it, and then we recover. And the recovery phase is usually then relaxing, eating, sleeping, and then having babies. But when our body is in this constant state of stress, when we never get a chance to recover, when we are stressed, the non-essential functions of our body that we don't need to actually fight the enemy or to run from it, and they are our digestive system and our reproductive system, they get shut down. So when our body perceives that we are in this state of danger, it's not going to support reproduction.
Yeah, it's such a prevalent a condition, quote unquote,
Mm-hmm.
I suppose,
Yeah.
that so many of us are experiencing that without even realizing it. So I think it's just good to flesh that out a little bit more. What are some of the things that people can do from your perspective to de-stress, to help enable them a little bit more? And I know that you mentioned earlier that there are normally a number of contributing factors that impact fertility, but if we're just focusing on stress for the moment, what would you recommend a couple should do to de-stress?
$1 million
Or
question.
take on the grandparents' advice and go away for a weekend?
Yeah. I think identifying the stressors and then identifying your own response to those stressors, because it's not the stressor that's the problem, it's how we respond to it.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is to do with perception and how we perceive a situation. There are a lot of, I'd say maybe if it's really severe, there are a lot of qualified people out there, counsellors, etc., that may be able to help you reassess how you are actually perceiving the situation you're in, take stock of what's actually causing you stress, what can you eliminate, what do you have control over, what do you not have control over, prioritise things. And I think too, in today's day and age, we're all trying to do everything. And I think we need to cull a few things and go, right, this is not necessary. Or if I don't get this done today, what's really going to happen? Does it really matter? And then there's, the mindfulness exercises, there's yoga, there's Tai Chi, there's meditation, reading a book, acknowledging that you need time for yourself, or some people regenerate and relax if they spend time with others, the connectivity of a community and friends and family, whereas others need to escape that and be on their own. So I think we need to identify what we need inside ourselves to be able to recover, recoup, relax, and be ready again to go again. So it's a bit of looking at yourself and what works for you.
I love that. And in regards to what you mentioned about people putting so much on their plate and rushing around all the time or being so busy, I heard a term coined recently called the rushing woman syndrome.
Yes,
And I think there's lots of women that could relate to that for sure, because we do tend to put a lot on our plate.
definitely. And I think we women have become our own worst enemy because we want to be and do everything.
Yeah, right. I agree. I know. I put my hand up probably. I'm one of
I,
those women.
I think in all fairness, I think most women are guilty of that.
Yeah, yeah. Fortunately, I don't have to worry about my fertility because my fertility years are well and truly over. I've got 3 kids, so that's okay. But that doesn't mean that I still should not be worried about stress, because it does impact health in other ways other than just fertility. So
Mhm.
when we're looking at some of these I suppose the impacts or the causes of fertility issues, can you explain to us how do those factors increase the child's risk of disease in their life? So you're saying that it all starts right from even before we conceive.
Mhm.
Just sort of walk us through that concept of how, if I haven't looked after my body and prepped my body for conception, and then if I'm not looking after my body, and I think most of us understand that when we are pregnant, we should be looking after our body and also our unborn child. But how does not looking after your body beforehand impact your unborn child once it's born in the future, in terms of any diseases it potentially could get as a result of not prepping properly?
Okay. Well, if we look at it from a nutritional perspective, if we as, say, the mother are nutritionally deficient, then our biochemistry is not going to be balanced and things aren't going to happen in the body the way they should. Also, what happens if we can get genetic alterations as well when we're exposed to certain things in our environment, but it's the health of the eggs and the health of the sperm that's really setting the foundation. If the egg's not healthy, then you may still have a baby, you may still conceive, but just trying to think of an analogy. Probably this one here. This one blew my mind when I actually read this while I was researching for the book. The woman's egg, I think it's also related to, you asked a question about a lot of women now are deciding to start a family later in life. So many are 35 years of age or older. So where we used to maybe decide to have children in our late teens, early 20s, so maybe 10, even 15 years earlier than now, in those 10 and 15 years that we are now older, we are exposed to more environmental toxins, to more of the lifestyle issues, to more ongoing stress, to all these things. And that wears us out, just like stress makes us feel tired. It also has an impact on our eggs. So when the sperm actually meets the egg and it fertilizes and gets just into the inside, a healthy, vibrant female ovum actually assesses the health of the sperm and she checks him out. She goes, you're not quite right there. You're a bit damaged over here, mate. Well, let me just fix you up and then we can carry on and we can start dividing into cells and make this baby. And if she's not healthy and if she's a bit tired and if she's older or if she's facing challenges of her own toxins in there, she's going to go, oh, mate, you're not the best, but you're all I've got, so let's give it a shot. So the health of our eggs can actually repair damage of some of the damage the sperm may bring into that egg before she allows it to be fertilized. Now, that just blew my mind.
It's
It is
amazing. It
amazing. Our
really,
bodies are so incredible and they have so much intelligence.
I
Um,
know.
so, the baby's then made up of the genetic material, half from the mother and half from the father. So if there's any genetic alterations that come together there, and if the egg can't correct them, then the baby is born with those alterations and is stuck with them. So they get passed on. And then we've got the nutrients, like I said, they're the building blocks for every cell and every tissue that's made. And after fertilization, there's such rapid division of cells and so many new cells being made every day, into the thousands. But it follows a very, very strict timeline. And if there's a nutrient missing one day, the body doesn't go back and go, okay, I can't do this today because I don't have enough, B12. I'll come back and do that tomorrow. That's not how it works. So we, as a mum, have to make sure that all our nutrients are there at sufficient levels for our body to function, but also for that baby to be created.
That's such an important point when you think about it, because I think a lot of people do assume that, oh, yeah, if I don't have it now, I'll catch up on it later. I'll in terms of, the nutrients or the supplements that you might need to be taking as part of, preparing, for conceiving. I think that's a really great segue into the next question, that there's been such a strong historical perception that women are the bearers of ensuring fertility, right? And as we know that it takes two to make a baby, but you do kick off with focusing on the importance of male fertility in your book. And in fact, you cite that the male sperm, as you've just been alluding to, plays an important role in the formation of the placenta and also helping to prevent miscarriage, which I had no idea about. That blew my mind away. Talk us through. I don't know how I ever had 3 children without having read your book first, to be honest. But talk us through this, how the sperm plays an important role in the formation, of conception, and just also in helping to prepare for fertility as well.
Okay. Well, the sperm, what it looks like? It looks like a little tadpole. And in the front of the sperm, you've got what's called the head. And that head contains the information. And one of the things in there that is essential for once it gets into the egg and for the cells to start developing is enough of the mineral calcium. Without the calcium, it won't start dividing. So the amount of calcium that's in that sperm cell is really important. It's a trigger. The other thing is the mitochondria, which is the energy driver of the sperm. They need to, and it's got thousands of mitochondria in that tiny, tiny little sperm cell that can propel it and give it the energy to then do its job. So if it can't do that job, then first of all, it can impact the implantation of the fertilized egg. It won't implant into the uterus wall. The other thing that the sperm dictates within that egg is then the formation of the placenta. And if that doesn't happen properly, then the placenta won't form, or it won't form correctly, and that can then lead to miscarriage. So the health of the sperm is essential for that, but it even just, the numbers of sperm has drastically decreased. Research starting in 1973 and then revisited again in 2017 has shown that men are losing sperm numbers about 10% over every decade. And since 1973 till now, we've seen an overall fall of 60% in sperm numbers worldwide.
That's huge.
It is.
That's
It's
a
massive.
huge statistic.
It is absolutely massive. We really need to help our men realise that what they do and the 4 main impacts on a man's sperm are smoking, cigarette smoking, alcohol, radiation, and toxins. And these are things that are just abound everywhere.
Yeah. Can you talk us through that a little bit more in terms of how each of those 4 main things impact a man's sperm, and specifically in what way do they impact a man's sperm?
Okay. The specifics of it, smoking actually can lower the sperm count. I actually listed all in my book. I think I've read it through often enough, I know it's off the top of my head. So with smoking in particular, sperm concentrations are between 13 and 70% lower than in non-smokers. And with the smoking also, a woman sleeping next to a man who smokes will also be affected by the cigarette smoke, and so will the baby because it comes through in the sperm.
Yeah, the
Um,
passive smoke, I suppose, coming off the body and
exactly.
yeah, is that yeah.
Now, the chronic alcohol intake actually affects the male hormone, lowering the testosterone and increasing his estrogen. So high estrogen is
Mm,
something men definitely do not want.
no.
Um, so there's also heat stress, physical stress on the testicles because they're outside of the body, so they're subject to trauma. So I just think of football players.
Yeah, and you said cyclists as well in the book as
Yeah,
well, right? Because
cyclists.
they're lycra and it's all everything's all tight and
Yeah,
hot in there when they're cycling.
exactly right. And the gonads really don't like heat. They're very sensitive
Mm.
to heat. Another thing too that we don't really think of because we use it every day, mostly all day, is the radiation from laptops, mobile phones. And
Well, and you said don't put your laptop on your
that's
lap.
right.
How many of us sit there, maybe we will decide that we're going to walk away from the desk and we want to go sit somewhere a bit comfy and you put your laptop on your lap and you're sitting there typing away. I mean, how many of us do that?
Well,
Wow.
exactly right. Or tablets, where do people sit them?
Mm.
They rest them in their lap or they give them to young children to play with. But they've done research, and especially when you're connected to the internet, there's a lot of radiation that constantly comes out. And again, these cells are very delicate and radiation affects the DNA. So that's where radiation comes into it. And toxins, there's a great big long chapter dealing with environmental toxins, and it's just huge. And there's things in our daily lives that we all have around us. And
Mm.
each of these has to be cleared by our body in one way or another. So if we're just exposed to one toxin, then our body kind of goes, oh, okay, that's fine. I can clear that out. That's what I'm here for. But if you give it one on top of another and multiple ones together and there's more here and more there, our body can't cope. So what it tends to do, it tucks them away into tissues because it cannot clear them quickly enough. And then it starts to damage those tissues and then it starts to get inside the cells. And that's when we get chronic illness.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And look, I'd really like to do a deeper dive shortly into environmental toxins because I think that in itself deserves, some significant focus. But um, in regards to when we have children, so many of us now are having children later in life for a variety of reasons, whether it's a personal choice or whether it's fertility issues. And it's not just with women, but also men. And 35, it seems to be the age of when conceiving starts to become more difficult, right? So, why is that? Why is that the I suppose that golden age bit, the 35, I don't know what to call it, to be honest, but 35 seems to be the
Yeah.
number of, uh-oh,
Yeah.
we're running out of time here.
Um, I don't know. I don't know why
Yeah,
it's
right.
35. I don't know if that's because that's the age most people are delaying starting a family too, or if there is something that's particularly happening at that point, or if our bodies are just becoming so tired and fatigued at that point. I think it's more related to that seems to be the average age when a lot of people are deciding to start a family these days.
Mm,
And I think as that age moves forward and goes into the 40s and mid 40s, then they will focus on that age rather than the early one. But it seems that up until that age, we're doing okay. But from that age, we seem to see an increase in problems. And I think
mm.
it just has to do with the length of time that we're exposed to everything.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because, when I think back to when I had my kids and I was one of those who had, my children in my 20s, right? And I was very fortunate that I conceived quite easily. And I had no issues at all in conceiving back in my 20s. I don't know what I'd be like, obviously I don't want to conceive now because I'm 54, but I look at my daughter as an example, and she's 33, and I feel like I'm a bit of a nana sometimes where I keep saying to her, oh, come on, that clock's ticking away, you're running out of time. You should start looking at having kids soon.
Mm,
And but it does worry me. And I think that, so many couples think that, oh, it's okay, we're in our mid 30s, 40s, whatever, it'll be okay, we'll still be able to fall pregnant. But when they get to that age,
mhm,
all of a sudden they can't, or all of a
mhm.
sudden it's more
Yeah,
difficult. And I don't know that it's well publicized, that we talk about it
no,
enough, that, actually that it seems to me that the premium time to be able to conceive is in your 20s. So, maybe, people feel they're too young to have kids then.
You're right, it's not publicised, and that was another driving force for me to write this book. And I think another thing too that we need to realise is that each generation is facing more and more toxins and more
Mm.
challenges. If you compare life now to 100 years ago, there's almost no comparison. And that's also what it is. So we in our 20s would have been healthier than our children in their 20s. And it's not through any fault of their own. And I try and stress that in my book as well, that, this isn't sort of finger pointing and going, oh, you should know this or anything. It's not. It's about letting people know all about these challenges and what we're facing. And we don't know it because no one tells us, because it's not in mainstream.
No.
And I mean, with all the environmental toxins, I mean, I can read you out some amazing statistics, and they're just absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, go for it. I'd love to
Um,
hear.
so there are 400 million tons of chemicals that are produced annually.
Gosh.
I know. And in 1954, there was about 600,000 chemical compounds that were known. So by 2009, that had increased to 50 million.
That is a huge
It
growth.
is incredible. And each year, and this is in Britain alone, 4.5 billion litres of pesticides are sprayed on crops.
Oh, well, it makes me gag even thinking about
Yeah,
it.
and when you look at the health graphs of children, of adults, of various diseases, they all correlate with this increase in spraying of our crops with
Mm,
certain substances. And I mean, it's not just that it gets sprayed on the crops, but it goes into the soil, it goes into the waterways. If we don't eat the plants direct, the animals that we eat, they have eaten the plants. We get it through the animals. We're the end of the food chain, so we cop the
yeah.
whole lot of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point because you don't think about being at the end of the food chain as a human, do you?
No, no, but we are. We're right at the top. So everything that we consume that has been exposed to any toxin will concentrate those toxins, and we then take it into our body. And I mean, people say, but if it weren't safe, they wouldn't be allowed to use it. Trouble is that it's the manufacturers who self-regulate. They say we've tested it. They may well have on lab animals, the poor things, small amounts for a short period of time. But we're exposed to a multitude of these chemicals, and these chemicals all interact with each other inside us, and those tests are never carried out.
No, and I think it's only in recent times that we're, I think, starting to become more aware of hidden toxins in foods and becoming more aware of that our fruit and vegetables have been sprayed with pesticides, but it's also the hidden toxins in processed foods because particularly in Western diets, we have such high processed
Mm-hmm.
diets rather than whole source foods.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's where we need to be more aware of what is hidden and how that is impacting our bodies
Mm-hmm.
and potentially impacting our ability to conceive. Would you agree?
Totally. And with the processed foods, it's actually a double-edged sword because they're so highly processed that a lot of the nutrients have been lost.
Mm,
Because those nutrients have been lost, they then add things like salt and sugar and fats to make them more palatable. So we have a greater need, well, we have a need to consume more of that food until our body says, okay, now I have enough nutrients. So we're increasing the calorie intake. So there comes the weight issues. But then not only are we getting less nutrients in our food, but we're also getting all those toxins as well. So we're getting a double whammy because our body needs the nutrients to be able to deal with toxins. So we're nutritionally deficient and we're being bombarded with chemicals, and the two don't go well together.
yeah. So how I suppose this links to my next question in terms of how early should you start preparing your body for conceiving a child? But can I add to that also, how do we prepare to rid our body of those environmental toxins as part of that preparation?
I think an ideal time would be 12 months because for women, our eggs, as they develop in the ovary, when they start to actually develop to move around the ovary ready to be popped out to ovulate, that's about a 12-month period. So if during that period that little cell that's starting to mature, it will then mature in a healthy environment. For a man, 12 months is also ideal, but 6 months if you really can't handle any more than that. The best way to do it would be take stock of everything that you're exposed to, become aware of the toxins in your life and try and remove them. Really good places to start are in the home, kitchen and bathroom. And, I guess when I say that, our mind might go to cleaners and things like that. But it's also all the personal care products, the shampoos, the conditioners, the moisturizers, and all these things that we put on our skin every day. Can I digress?
Yes, absolutely.
I have a really lovely story to tell of a woman who had a young baby, 2 weeks old, and the baby was frothing at the mouth.
Oh.
Anyway, she came in to a clinic and the receptionist rang through to the naturopath and said, I've got a lady out here who is in some strife. Can she come in? But open your windows. Now, that was code for this person is wearing a lot of perfume.
Right.
So anyway, so the mum came in, they sat together, and she was actually told to do away with all her perfumes, with her perfumed aerosols at home, and all the chemicals that she was using. To this lady's credit, she went away and she completely cleaned up her entire household and her personal care. She rang the naturopath back 2 weeks later and she said, my baby has stopped frothing.
So it was the perfume and the other scented products that she was using in her home that was causing this baby to froth. My goodness.
And this is what I mean. Like, you could have that with one baby and the baby's not showing any signs, and this baby did show signs. So I would link that to how toxic is that baby when it comes into the world. And then that little bit extra is just too much for it.
Yeah,
and our bodies are the same. So that's why 12 months is a nice time to start detoxing and preparing for conception. But it depends on what you've been exposed to. If you have a lot of heavy metals and chemicals stored in your body, ideally we should try and clean those out before you conceive. So there's no hard and fast rule. In order to know what you need to do, it's best to test. And a really good test that is non-invasive, is one of the least expensive, is the hair tissue mineral analysis, because that shows us the mineral levels as well as the heavy metals and toxins. And that gives us a really good baseline then to work with. There are more tests. There's hormone tests, there's metabolic tests to show our nutrient levels, how our body is actually metabolizing our nutrients. And then, of course, there's DNA testing. So there's always tests that can be done, but I think a good start is a comprehensive blood and maybe a hair analysis. And then you know what you're dealing with.
And because you don't necessarily know that you have toxins in your body, do you? Because sometimes it takes a while for those toxins to build up and for symptoms to develop. And I'm speaking from personal experience because I think it was back when we were in shutdown with COVID, and all of a sudden I developed terrible symptoms and found out by visiting my naturopath that I had high mercury levels in my body, which just blew my mind away, because I'm thinking, where on earth did I get mercury poisoning from in my body? It made me so sick. But, it seems that it had been in my body for some time, and there was this sort of built up until the body said, enough's enough. We've got to do something about this.
Exactly.
So this is why it's important to test, right? Because we don't know what we don't know.
That's right. We don't know what we don't know. And the symptoms of heavy metals, again, can be really varied. One person may get really bad headaches, another person might get nausea, another person might get joint aches. It's not, you have this metal, this is the symptom you have. That's not how it works. And just also to highlight that, just because you mentioned mercury, if there's too much mercury in the mother's body, then that can actually lead to a cleft palate in the child.
Wow.
Yeah, because
gosh,
the heavy metals are not only toxic in their own right, but they also block the uptake of certain nutrients.
Yeah.
So again, a double whammy.
Yeah. Are there other nutrients or are there other toxins that can cause changes to the fetus, like what you've just explained, like with the cleft palate? Are there others that people should be aware of?
Yeah, anything that affects the DNA of cells or how cells reproduce, that can affect a child and what will happen to it. And like I said, it can be the chemical or the toxin that can do it directly, or it can do it by blocking a nutrient. And so many nutrients are essential for different stages of the development of the child. So, I mean, a better known one would be folate and neural tube defects. So you may have enough folate, you may even be supplementing correctly, but if you have the metals or the chemicals that block its uptake or its conversion, then that child may still develop neural tube defects, for example.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, it's so obviously so important to prepare the body to conceive. But what role, we've talked about environmental toxins, what role do viruses play in impacting fertility?
Viruses actually live, or they need to live inside our cells. They hijack our cells because they need to use our DNA in order to reproduce. So by entering into the nucleus of the cell, they can actually play havoc and alter our DNA, which is also one way in which viruses help us to adapt to our new environment.
Hmm.
So they can be good, but because they live inside our cells, they're difficult to treat through medication. And viruses, like I said, they affect our DNA, and due to that, the extent of any damage to that baby is not fully known. But the World Health Organization has now come out and said that viruses, the Epstein-Barr virus and the human herpes group of viruses, have actually been linked to neonatal and childhood cancer.
Right, gosh.
And there's other researchers, Dr. Hulda Clark comes to mind, who spent her lifetime researching the effect of microbes, in particular viruses and bacteria and parasites, on our health and on the development of diseases, including cancer. So they play a huge role. And I think we need to consider microbes as another kind of toxin. It's
Yep.
just another burden on our body.
Can you flesh that out a bit more for us when you're talking about microbes?
Oh, okay, sorry.
What
Microbes
refer?
is a general term that I use to include viruses, bacteria, fungus,
Gotcha.
and
Yep.
the parasites.
Yep.
And living in southeast Queensland, mold is huge.
Mm.
A lot of people will develop irritations, whether it's skin, whether it's respiratory tract, and they don't really know why until they dig deeper. And then there's mold with all the humid weather and the floods that we've had. Our homes can have a lot of mold and we're not even aware of it.
And so this is when it impacts our mitochondria,
Mm-hmm.
and then has that flow-on impact and can lead to chronic disease and all sorts of other symptoms, right, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. It's absolutely fascinating in terms of the amount of things that can impact fertility, let alone your ability to conceive. You've mentioned in your book as well frequency therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what that is and how people can access
Okay.
that?
Frequency therapy is based on the research that every single living cell, regardless of what plant or animal it is in, has its own unique frequency. And you can use frequency therapy to help clear, say, viruses out of the body. Now, say we use the Epstein-Barr virus, which has been linked to be a culprit to quite a few different conditions. If you introduce the frequency of the Epstein-Barr virus, which is inverted and may not make sense, but just say that you put the frequency of the Epstein-Barr virus through a person's body that doesn't have Epstein-Barr, it won't make any difference because it won't injure any of the healthy cells. But if you use that on someone who does have Epstein-Barr, you can clear it out of the body, just like you can clear herpes 1 or 2. It's a very specific treatment. There's various devices on the market. There's various practitioners. Some of the qualified health practitioners have devices. There are some people who bought devices and do an online course and still offer it. I always ask people, make sure that you get the qualifications of the person operating the device. What I used to do it myself in clinic, but people are time poor. The treatment can be quite lengthy, 1 to 2 hours. So now I've actually reverted to recommending that people buy a little device for their home use. There are no
Okay.
wires, no nothing. You put it in the room. It covers 10 square meters, so you can actually treat people while they're asleep. And you
Right.
just program in the frequencies that are applicable to a particular person.
Okay, I might get you to send me the link to that after we've chatted, and then I can put it in the show notes afterwards so people can access what you're recommending
Okay.
in regards to that particular product. I just wanted to take a step back because I think I'm having a little bit of a mind-blowing moment here in terms of something you mentioned earlier about how these viruses and the toxins and so on can cause childhood cancers. So I'd like to flesh that out a little bit more because I would really like our listeners to have a have a really good understanding of how not preparing for conception can absolutely have an impact on your child's future child's health, right? And so can you flesh that out a little bit more for us, Dagmar, in terms of how does that happen? Like how do the choices that I make or the choices that I don't make, i.e. not getting tested for toxins, not getting tested for viruses, can then have an impact on my future child's health and in the long term potentially as well, right?
I guess it all boils down to the fact that these toxins or viruses, they affect how a cell develops, how a cell replicates.
Mm.
So cells have to replicate perfectly, so that all tissues that are stomach cells become stomach cells, and those that are meant to become skin, and that they differentiate properly and that they get the messages correct. So the viruses and the toxins, they play with that replication, which is the RNA. So then the message doesn't get through properly. And then you've got a skin cell that is actually developing into something else. And really, when we think of what cancer is, I'll say only, cells doing the wrong thing, getting the wrong messages.
Mm.
So if what's inside a cell in the nucleus and in the DNA is programmed to create something that's incorrect, that will somewhere down the line, unless the body can correct it itself, it can end up with some kind of condition, some sort of disease or health problem.
Yeah.
So it all boils down to how the cell can replicate itself properly and cells can do what they need to do. And if that is interrupted, then also all manner of things can happen. And the interruption can be caused by, like I said, lack of nutrients, environmental toxins, viruses, microbes, frequencies, anything that will alter that. Because when the child's forming, it is making so many new cells every single day. And if something goes wrong, it doesn't stop. And if too much of it goes wrong, it's one of the reasons why why women miscarry, or
Mhm.
why then there are stillbirths and all those other terrible traumatic things that can happen.
Mm. And despite the human body's amazing ability to be able to heal and regenerate, despite all of that, there is still that risk for that child that you have conceived, that you've given birth to, can develop these illnesses, these diseases as a result of, toxins in your own body and so on.
Mhm.
So despite that, it can still happen.
But I
Yeah.
think a lot of that too will depend on how toxic is then the life that that child is brought into.
Mm.
So if you pass on things to the baby that you don't know about, the baby is born and there's a few things going on in there that aren't quite right. If that baby then is brought into a pristine world with great nutrients and no chemicals, chances are that child may grow up just fine. But that's not reality. Like I
Mhm.
said before, our world now is so different to what it was even just 100 years ago, even just 60 years ago.
Mm.
And the rate at which it is changing is quite phenomenal. And progress is great, but I think it's coming at a huge cost.
In your research, in your clinical practice, and you've been in clinical practice for 20 years, what impact do these choices that we make about our own bodies have on some of these, I suppose, and I was going to use the word new, but they're not really new because they've been around for some time, but I suppose they're more prevalent because more children are being diagnosed with them or being labeled with them, ADHD, autism, and so on.
Mhm.
Where is the connection point there, or is there any?
There's few connection points, and one of them is also, like I mentioned earlier, the sprays, and that is glyphosate used on the genetically modified crops. The increase in the neurological disorders like the ADD, ADHD correlates perfectly with the increase of the use of glyphosate. And that becomes a biochemical reaction in the body because glyphosate actually changes certain structures of chemicals that are inside our body. So that's one huge impact. Another one, neurological disorders have a very big core source in the gut dysbiosis. And you'll find a lot of children who have behavioral issues, they have gut problems. So again, we're back to the gut. Hippocrates, all disease begins in the gut. He knew what he was talking about thousands of years ago. It still applies to us today. So gut health, look at what a lot of these children are eating. It's highly processed food. It's high salt, high sugar, additives like MSG, artificial colours and flavours. And a lot of them too are very taste and consistency sensitive. So then they become very fussy in what they will and won't eat. And parents have so much to deal with that they just think, oh, fine, just eat that and be quiet. And that's all that they can deal with. There's a big correlation between the toxins in the environment, the nutrient levels, and then the gut health when it comes to neurological disorders. Because in a nutshell, our nerves hate toxins.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes complete sense. So in your view, what should couples be looking at getting tested to ascertain their current infertility or fertility? And how important is it for them to do that?
I think if a couple is considering having a child and they want to know now what they can do for themselves, they want to get an idea where their body is at, comprehensive blood pathology with their doctor. And there's actually lists in the back of my book which list all the tests for both genders, and then specific ones for the woman and specific ones for the man. Then the hair tissue mineral analysis, purely because, like I said, it's non-invasive and you get really good information. So I think those two would be my go-to. And then, they'd be seeing, I would hope that they would be seeing a qualified naturopath, and they would then be able to ascertain what other testing is then advisable, whether it be a metabolic test or whether it be a DNA test. They may not be necessary. Couples might just say, look, I'd really like to know. I'd like to know what my genes look like and what may I be passing on to my child. And how can I take preventative action then for when my child is born, that my child will be leading a healthy lifestyle. They may have a SNP, which is a slight alteration on the MTHFR gene, which is one of the better known ones. So we just know that child will need to have good quality vegetables and the activated forms of the B vitamins involved. So there's always a way, there's mostly a way around something, as long as we know what we're dealing with.
Yeah, and I suppose depending on what tests they get done and what the results are out of those tests, then their practitioner would be able to guide them as to whether there's additional tests that they need to do or what steps they need to make to try to address some of the results that they may have received as a result of those tests,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So in your research, what nutritional deficiencies have you found contribute to infertility, and how important is the role of diet and nutrition in preparing for conceiving a baby? I mean, you've touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to do a bit of a deeper dive because I think this is another big area, right?
Nutrition is the foundation. If you don't have the nutrients, your body can't build anything with it. And when I'm talking about nutrients, I'm talking about the amino acids that we get from protein, because they're the building blocks of everything. And then we have the vitamins, and the vitamins are the cofactors. And cofactors is something that actually helps a biochemical reaction in the body to work. And in our body, we're just a biochemical soup. So things are either being built or they're being broken down. And in order to do that, we need vitamins and we also need minerals. Minerals are really important. Almost if I had to categorize them, I'd say minerals are more important to vitamins, because without minerals, nothing happens.
Yeah.
So I suppose well-known minerals would be your calcium, magnesium, zinc, iron, selenium, those ones. We get most of our nutrients from a good quality whole food diet. When people have elimination diets, or they've chosen to do diets which avoid particular food groups, then they need to know how they can then enhance their food choices to make sure they're getting enough. So, for example, somebody who's vegetarian or vegan needs to know how to combine their foods in order to get the complete proteins. But again, that can be done. So, bottom line would be a good quality whole food diet, optimally organic. We do what we can. So make wise choices there. Avoid processed. Always avoid processed foods. Like I said before, they're stripped of nutrients. They've got a lot of unwanted additives, and they're also full of chemicals. So there's your nutrients coming in. Sometimes we do need to supplement, and I think during pregnancy, most women do need to supplement because there's just such a higher need for nutrients. And we need to make sure that they're available for the baby. And even if there's enough for the baby, some of them, sometimes mum may be left deficient. And that's where I talk about baby brain, because baby brain is real. So without those essential fatty acids, mums just find the car keys in the freezer or some other things. But because Bubs is taking it all, so we do need to supplement throughout pregnancy these days. Avoiding as many of those toxins as possible, avoiding re-exposure, drinking clean water, really, really important. And especially when it comes once baby's born, bathing the baby. Our tap water is full of chlorine and fluoride and heavy metals. So our skin is our largest organ and it does absorb things. So when you give your baby a bath, it would be good to bath it in filtered water, not tap water.
Yeah. And I was just about to say, what would you qualify as being clean water? Because, there are different views as to what clean water is, right?
Well, you can have different grades of filters. You got from reverse osmosis, but that strips everything out of the water. So it's basically dead water, which then has to be re-ionized. But mainly water that filters out the toxins. That would be the ideal. Good food, correct supplements, clean water, getting enough sleep. Sleep can't be stressed enough. It's when our body repairs. Movement, the exercise, also very important. And yes, try and get that stress under control and your reactions and responses to stressors.
And can I just say that I'm sure that there are going to be lots of very happy women out there that you have confirmed that baby brain is real.
It's very real.
And I know from personal experience, I felt like I had baby brain for I don't know how long after I had my children.
Mm-hmm.
It took a while for things to kick back in again and feel like my brain was working back to what it should be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of people think, oh well, that's just a myth. But thank you very much for confirming that it actually exists. Is there, when you're pregnant, is there any particular food group or food type that is really important for a pregnant woman to be eating in particular?
Vegetables, fruit, protein.
Yep. They're the three.
We need all of them. We need all of them because they're all essential. They're all the building blocks.
Yeah.
But there was research done in Germany and they found that the sweet point for the consumption of non-starchy vegetables and fruit is 600 grams a day.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like a lot, but divided over 3 meals, it really isn't. And also a good rule of thumb on the plate is half the plate should be vegetables or salad, a quarter protein and a quarter starchy vegetables, whether you have your pumpkin, your potato, sweet potato, rice, pasta, whatever you choose. That quarter, half is a pretty good rule of thumb as well.
Yeah. And what are your views on protein? Because proteins aren't proteins, right? Necessarily. There's plant proteins and there's, animal protein, and there's lots of division between the two, and lots of, particularly in the biohacking community, lots of discussion at the moment around what are the preferred types of protein or the better sources of protein. So there's lots of different views out there. From your perspective?
Well, animal protein contains what is called a complete protein. So of the 20 or so amino acids, 9 of those are termed essential, which means our body can't make them, which means we need to get those essential amino acids from our food. And the foods that contain the complete protein, which is those 9 essential amino acids, are only your plant source, your animal sources. That doesn't mean you can't get it from plants. You can, you just have to know how to combine it. So grains plus lentils gives you a complete protein.
Mm-hmm.
Nuts plus grains, nuts plus legumes. There's that combination of how you combine your foods to get that complete protein. Whether one protein or the other is better, it's not so much the protein, it's the amino acids that we need, because the amino acids are the building block. You just need to know how to combine those foods
Sure.
to get what you need. But if you're not eating animal products, there are some nutrients that can be deficient in the diet, and that's your B12. It's your iron sometimes people struggle with, vitamin D. So again, you just need to know, and the essential fatty acids. You just need to be aware of this and know where to then get those from. So then that's where supplementation is an option.
Yeah. So we touched on supplementation before, and you listed some of them off. Do they apply to men as well? And if so, or how long should a man or a woman be taking supplements in preparation for conceiving? Or are they different?
No, they're the same. It's still the 12 months. It's still the optimal time frame.
Mm-hmm.
For men, for the production of sperm, if there are any issues, there's the two minerals, zinc and selenium, are very important, and they've been shown to really help with the sperm quality and quantity as well. But again, men shouldn't just go out and buy, or women shouldn't just go and buy the minerals for their partner. Again, he needs to be assessed, because he needs to be assessed, does he actually need it? And if so,
Mm.
what's the dose? Because minerals are great, we need them, but they can also work in opposition to each other. And if you have too much zinc, you could be blocking your iron or your copper. So we need to keep things in balance. But the zinc and the selenium are very important for the sperm. Selenium is a very powerful antioxidant, and the sperm, because they can actually be up to 6 months old before they're actually put to work, there's a lot of oxidative damage that can happen to them in the meantime. So you can protect them through the minerals.
Yeah, fascinating. So with those supplements, how long do they have to keep taking them post conception, or actually let me change that question. How often would you have to get tested to ascertain what your levels are so you can ensure optimum, I suppose, levels of any of your minerals or any your supplements and so on, or anything that you should be taking?
Just as a general ongoing health measure,
Yeah.
I'd say once a year. I think every 12 months is a good time frame to just have your health assessed, regardless.
Mm. Yeah. Great. Okay. Let's go back to environmental impacts, and flesh that out a bit more, because it doesn't only impact our health, but as you've discussed, also fertility. But I'd like to focus on oxidative stress, in particular on the cells,
Mm-hmm.
and how environmental toxins impacts the development of the fetus. So can you flesh that out a little bit more for us, in particular around oxidative stress, because I don't think many people would be aware of that.
Okay, well, oxidative stress is a term given when there are free ions, we call them free radicals, that are in the body that can damage our tissue or our cells. So these free radicals can be neutralized by what we know as antioxidants. So some of the most, I guess, well-known one is your vitamin C, but vitamin A, vitamin E are also antioxidants. Probably the lesser known ones are glutathione, and then you've got the head honcho of them all is superoxide dismutase, known as SOD.
Mhm.
So to help people understand, if we have one free radical, a vitamin C molecule will be able to quench, fight, remove one free radical. So it's a one for one molecule, one free radical. When we get to glutathione, one molecule of glutathione can quench 100 free radicals. Then we get to SOD, and SOD can quench 1,000,000 free radicals.
Wow.
Now, the cool thing is our body can make both glutathione and SOD.
Mhm.
So again, it's about giving our body the tools to make what it is made to do. Sometimes taking a lot of vitamin C can actually block glutathione. So, and we get these triggers, and this is called nutrigenomics. It's how food actually communicates with our genes. And by
Mhm.
eating the whole foods, it actually communicates, gives a message to our DNA. You need to switch on this fella over here to make the glutathione, which our body does. Then the quality control goes through and goes, right, guys, we've got it all done. Down regulate the glutathione again. And that works really well because it does the job, but doesn't overdo it. So again, free radicals, oxidative stress causes cell damage, and any cell or DNA damage is going to affect the developing fetus.
Yeah, fascinating. Thanks for explaining that. Let's chat about PCOS next because I want to get an understanding for our listeners what role that plays in fertility because I've heard so many women having this condition. How does this impact fertility?
Well, because PCOS is hormonal mostly, anything that affects the hormones will also affect fertility because in order for a woman to be fertile, she needs a good balance of estrogen and progesterone. Progesterone has to be there in sufficient quantities to maintain that early stage of pregnancy. PCOS is often misdiagnosed, and women are told they have PCOS when they actually don't. So it really needs someone who knows what they're looking for to be able to be very specific with it. So PCOS has a metabolic component, which means it's often linked with blood sugar imbalances, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and often being overweight. To be honest, the women that I have seen in clinic who've had PCOS, none of them have been overweight and none of them have had type 2 diabetes. So more research is coming out and there's various grades of PCOS and various types. But what is always involved is that the woman has too high the testosterone or androgen levels are too high. And hormones work like other things as well. If testosterone's too high and it's not converting to estrogen, then she's not going to have enough estrogen, which fuels her fertility. Also, the high testosterone increases prolactin, which stops and blocks progesterone. So there's no progesterone there to then sustain a pregnancy. So that's how that sort of fits in a very, very brief summary.
Yeah, right. Thank you. And yeah, look, I think anybody that has that obviously needs to get the right support to be able to address that, as you said. So it just seems to me that there are so many different things that can impact fertility. It seems like quite a minefield, doesn't it? And we haven't really touched on things like inflammation and well, you mentioned sleep earlier, but walk us through how inflammation and sleep impacts fertility as well.
Well, sleep is when our body repairs itself, and lack of sleep or poor quality sleep causes inflammation. It also causes weight gain. Inflammation causes weight gain. Weight gain, excess weight causes inflammation. So all these factors fuel each other. Inflammation it's a natural response that our body has to react and repair some sort of damage. So, you sprain your ankle, it swells, it gets hot, it's immobilized, that's inflammation. The cells go there, the blood flows there, it starts to heal it, and then it goes away. And then again, quality control comes in. Yep, good, we're all healed, inflammation off. Problem happens when the inflammation off switch doesn't actually occur. And a lot of people who've had inflammatory conditions have suppressed that inflammation a lot of the time with medication, which may have been absolutely essential for them to actually keep functioning. But what we're learning now is the consequence is that there's this low-grade inflammation constantly burning and sizzling away underneath. And that is, we're now recognizing, also contributing to autoimmune diseases, to disrupting the immune function. So again, we have immune function dysregulated. We can't fight the bugs, the viruses, the infections. We're getting tissue damage because our immune system starts to attack its own tissue. So again, it's a whole cascade.
Yeah, look, it's just absolutely fascinating to see how many things impact fertility. I think it's quite mind-blowing to me. I
It is
had no
mind-blowing, and I
idea.
think that's
Yeah.
why we need to share this information so that people realize and go, oh my goodness, it'll blow their mind, and they'll go, right, but I can do something about it. I can actually
Well,
be in control. I can change this. And I
mm.
think that is going to be a huge moment.
And how wonderful is that? That gives couples hope that yes, they can take control of this, and there are options for them in terms of improving their fertility chances, and working with a professional such as yourself in order to be able to work through. Okay, well, what are those barriers? What are those hurdles? What is our pathway to addressing all of this and to achieving the desired result of a, beautiful, healthy baby in our arms at the end of the day, right?
Exactly.
Which is just what everybody wants. Let's touch on exercise, because this is another area that does impact fertility. I mean, it is one of the key longevity hallmarks by we doing exercise, cryotherapy, infrared saunas. It places just enough stress on the body to start that cellular regeneration and start some of the healing process. But there, on the flip side, in your book, you warn against excessive exercise rather, for women trying to conceive. Why is that, and what do you consider excessive exercise when you're trying to conceive?
I think it depends on what the person has been doing. It's difficult to compare two people doing exercise, one doing quite heavy duty, maybe running a lot, training for a marathon, going to the gym very regularly, to then there's also the weekend athlete. So if someone has been exercising regularly and they're exercising to their fitness level and they do a 10K run every day, for them that's normal and their body is coping and their body is healthy and all their health parameters are in line, not a problem, brilliant. Then we've also got what they call the weekend athlete, where they run the risk of causing too much oxidative stress on their body because they're not supporting that extra burden that they're placing on their body over the weekend, and it takes quite a few days to then do all that repair and negate all that oxidative stress that they have actually caused. So it depends on what's normal for each person. Also, with a lot of exercise, an exercise that extends over more than 45 minutes starts to drop blood sugar levels. So if a person has healthy blood sugar regulation, they might be fine with that. Anybody who's a little bit on the waiver with that, then perhaps bear in mind, don't exercise for more than 45 minutes in one stretch. Depending on what the exercise is, if it's quite vigorous, it also causes tissue acidity, which again is a normal side effect, and our body knows how to deal with it as long as it has the ability to deal with it. So tissue acidity also lowers the oxygen content of that tissue, so then we get cell damage and we get inflammation. It's all relative, and I think you've realised by now I can't give a straight answer, because one thing I've learned is that everyone's different.
Oh, well, we're all bio-individual, right? So, of course, everyone's different, and that makes complete sense.
So I guess excessive would be people who really just keep pushing beyond that pain barrier. Listen to your body. If it really starts to hurt or become uncomfortable, go, okay, I'll leave it there and I'll stay there. I'll strengthen my body, and then I'll see if I can go further in a week or 10 days or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, good advice. So we've prepared our bodies for conceiving, and we've fallen pregnant. What are the key things women should be doing to ensure the health of her growing fetus and for that child once it's born?
Okay, well, while the fetus is growing inside you, same thing, avoiding the toxins that you now know all about. Have a really, really good diet. Take your quality supplements. Get sleep, because you won't get very much once the baby's born. Just a healthy lifestyle. So for women, it's definitely no alcohol during pregnancy, no cigarettes. No caffeine is also advisable, because the baby's body can't actually process the caffeine.
Interesting.
So it's good to avoid caffeine. But again, some women cope with it. Some babies even cope with it while in utero. Lots and lots of veggies. Get movement. If you've been exercising regularly, there is no reason, if you're having a healthy pregnancy, why you can't continue, at least until you physically cannot no longer do it, if your tummy's getting too big. If you haven't exercised a lot prior to that, just going for a nice walk outdoors is really, really beneficial.
Yeah, wonderful. Good advice. All right. Well, look, it's been absolutely fascinating to have a chat to you. When is your book out?
Should be early July. I think we're on track. It might even be right at the beginning of July.
Wow, so exciting for you.
It is very exciting.
Yeah, and look, just so much information in there for couples to access. Where will the book be available? Where can they purchase it from?
It'll be available on Amazon, both as an ebook and paperback.
Yep.
People will be able to order it from my website as well for local sales, and all the other online and normal bookshops as well.
Fabulous. So I'll get the link for all of your website as well, and we'll include that in the show notes so that people can access the book from there, or access other points of purchase as well from your website as well. Before I let you go today, I've got one more question that I ask all of my guests.
Okay.
What does it mean to you to live well longer?
To me, it means just being able to do all the things that I want to do without being sick, to have enough energy to live and enjoy life, and to have that energy and enjoyment until the end of this lifetime. And it might sound weird, but I want to die healthy. So I'd rather just go to bed one night and pass away peacefully and just sleep on, as opposed to, what some people go through with very long, drawn-out illnesses. And it's so draining on the family members as well. So, yeah, just to be healthy right up until the end.
Well, I don't think that sounds weird at all, and here's to dying healthy. Thanks, Dagmar, so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. It's been an absolutely intriguing conversation, and I have no doubt that there are lots of couples out there that will benefit from listening to this podcast, and indeed getting a copy of your book and reading that when it is published and available. Thanks again.
And thank you for giving me an opportunity to share some of the information that's in the book.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Well, that's a wrap for today's podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And if you'd like to learn more about biohacking, go ahead and sign up on my website at www.biohack-her.com to get a free copy of my 5 top biohacks to get your kick started. While you're there, you can also check out my blog page for more tips on biohacking. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so on Apple, Spotify, and Google Play. We'd love your support to keep this podcast going, and you can do so by leaving a review on your preferred podcast platform. And a reminder that information provided in this podcast does not constitute medical advice and is for educational purposes only. Please consult your preferred medical practitioner if you need support for your own health journey. Until next time, remember to live well longer.